Hey folks, welcome to Navigating ERP Implementation, Steering Clear of Common Mistakes. My name is Kareem. I'm going to be your host today. A little bit about me. I'm a business advisor over here at Odoo. You guys have gotten my best and only close to a headshot, so I hope you appreciate it. But today, we're going to be diving into some of the common mistakes that folks make while implementing ERP solutions. I've collected a few of the most frequently encountered pitfalls I've personally seen, and I'm going to walk you through how Odoo's Quick Start methodology can help ensure your implementation goes as smoothly as possible. So feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. I will get to them at the end of this webinar, but I want you to, go crazy. Feel free to ask away. I am going to talk a little bit about Odoo. I know since you are in this implementation, since we're talking about implementation, you're probably somewhat familiar with Odoo. So I won't go too deep, but again, any questions, let me know. Then we're going to go through some common mistakes and pitfalls. After that, a little bit about our quick start methodology, some communication and tools, and then we're going to open it up for a little question and answer, and I can start to dive in. How's that sound? Perfect. Okay, a little bit about us, right? Odoo is meant to grow with you, right? We are focused on becoming and being that scalable solution that as you start to add revenue streams, as you start to grow and become a more mature company, we're still going to be there for you every step of the way. A little bit about us as well. Over 4,000 employees. We're an international company. We've been around for 20 years, so we know a little bit about what we're doing. So to kind of dive into the nitty gritty here, dive into the nitty gritty here and the meat and potatoes of everything, we're going to go ahead and talk about implementation pitfalls. A couple of the ones that I've seen personally, first of all, are misaligned project expectations and misaligned project scopes, right? So this can arise from either maybe non-specific client requirements. Maybe the client isn't as familiar with their process workflows as they need to be. Maybe the single point of contact, you'll hear me say that a lot today, isn't prepared to communicate some of the business requirements or some of the workflows that they need to be. All of that can start to build up and cause some delays in some of the implementation phases. The next one is that inconsistent single point of contact, right? So maybe the client or the single point of contact isn't as available as they need to be. You're generally going to need around 8 to 10 hours each week between meetings, execution, and validation of some of the solutions we provide you. Also, maybe some poor responsiveness to project management requests. Emails are taking a couple days. We're reaching out to you for validation, and we can't move forward without your go-ahead. Maybe some low engagement from the single point of contact, right? We do need some skin in the game. We need you as the single point of contact. We're going to need you to help in adoption, right? Be Odoo's biggest champion, maybe help train and be that valuable resource that your colleagues can go to say, hey, I need help with Odoo, or hey, I need some instruction, or here's some feedback. Additionally, maybe there's too many cooks in the kitchen. A lot of folks like to have a change management committee. While that's great, we definitely recommend that single point of contact so that when we do have changes, we can make sure those get done quickly, efficiently, and on time and under budget, which is what we all want anyway, right? And the last is no clear definition of some of those roles and responsibilities. So it's very important that the contact that we're reaching out to, that we're connecting with, has decision-making authority and can do those quickly and efficiently. Again, they need to know that they have to be this advocate for the change management process with Odoo. And they need to be consistent and reliable. We need to be able to reach out to them whenever and vice versa. Now, to go into a little bit about how Odoo's Quick Start methodology solves for a lot of these issues. So a couple different principles that we really stand on, right, are we want to make sure that the solution is as standard as possible, right? That means it's going to be quicker to implement. Odoo has a lot of customizations available. I like to say we can be as wide or as or shallow or as deep as we need to be, but by limiting developments, we're able to make sure that we can deliver as quickly as possible, decrease that complexity, and add and reduce the amount of technical debt that we're going to be adding on to your project, as well as make sure we maintain long-term reliability, long-term stability, and less maintenance. Um, that kind of rolls into making sure we want to keep this affordable, right? All of this is a fundamental part of our quick start methodology. These are the principles we ride or die on. And we want to make sure that when we are working on a project with you, these are going to be kind of the foundational steps to a successful project in the end. So there are a couple different roles that are going to be vital to define, right? The first is that single point of contact. You might have heard me say it a couple different times before, but that single point of contact is going to be that super key user, right? They need to have a 360-degree understanding of the project requirements. They're going to be gathering and assessing those requirements, training some of those end users, being that advocate, being that champion for Odoo. And they're going to be that internal Odoo expert. So we want them to be that first level of support for their colleagues, right? Because at the end of the day, who better to teach you how to use Odoo with your internal processes than someone who's intimately familiar with your internal processes and workflows. So all of this is we are making sure that we are streamlining communication with them, prioritizing effectively, and building that in-house expertise, which is going to be vital. As I like to say, teach a man to fish, right? Additionally, you'll have your implementation consultant, right? So this is your point of contact over here at Odoo. They do have a team behind them. So if they ever have questions, they can always lean on their colleagues. But this is going to be your workflow expert. They are going to set up a detailed project management schedule, as well as split the implementation up into various phases to make it more manageable. And again, to streamline that communication and make sure we can get it in on time and under budget. All of this is going to consist, all of this is your implementation team, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that process and what it looks like, but it's important that we are able to define each of these roles, right? And attribute responsibility where it's needed so we can, again, maintain a consistent schedule. So onto the project. There are three various stages of this project, right? So the first is the discovery workshop. That is honestly one of the most crucial pieces to leading a successful project. So we're going to be splitting these after this discovery workshop. We're going to be splitting the project phase into multiple different phases, depending on what's critical to the business at the time. I mentioned minimum viable product or MVP. This is where we're going to be tackling that. After that, we'll look at a little bit of communication, some tools, follow-up and maintenance. But let's kind of hone in on this discovery stage first so we can get a better understanding of what you need and align on some of those project objectives. So with this discovery phase, this is really one of the most crucial parts of the project, right? Where it allows us to align expectations, set project goals, define those various project phases, and define a path to that minimum viable product. We're also defining the single point of contact and project managers' roles and responsibilities, how involved you need us to be, how involved you want us to be, and also setting up recurring scheduled meetings to report on progress. Again, the single point of contact on your end is going to need anywhere between 8 to 10 hours a week to communicate with Odoo, to validate those changes. So we want to make sure there's skin in the game on both sides. Here, really, with our discovery phase, we're finding any obstacles that might get in our way. We're focusing on proactively mitigating the risk that could come on a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, later on in the later stages of your project. Really splitting our implementation into separate phases of each of these stages, it allows us to, one, return, you see a faster return on investment, and also simplify this change management process. I have found that a lot of the different organizations I have worked with, either internally or externally, have a pretty complex change management process. So it always helps to simplify, right? There's a little bit of beauty and simplicity there. So again, why this discovery phase, right? Why would you've at this point you've probably talked about your project requirements ad nauseum. You've likely talked about it with your pre-sales rep. You've likely talked about it internally. Talked about it kind of finally when you've decided to go ahead and work with Odoo. But the biggest reason, I mean, it's going to seem like you're rehashing many of the points you discussed over and over again, but it's just so critical to make sure that the expectations for the project and expectations for the project scope are in sync. We need to be in lockstep to make sure that we're doing right by you and you're doing right by us. So also in this discovery phase, we're going to be sharing any critical documents, right? Anything that is absolutely needed to give us context to execute on your implementation. So this is when I said we split our stages into various phases, right? This is an example of what it looks like. It's a consistent iterative process, and it's one of the most critical elements of the Quick Start methodology, right? So we are again focusing on delivering that minimum viable product, right? To get your critical business operations going. This phasing cycle might be repeated several different times throughout the project, maybe several different times throughout a particular phase of the project. Really, I mean, at the end of the day, this is as big of a part of the implementation as the final execution. Next, we're going to take a look at the MVP, the minimum viable product. I've said this a couple of times throughout the presentation here, throughout this webinar, but only because it's so vital to understand. Really, we operate by this 80-20 rule. I'm sure you're familiar with it on your end, but really it says we should focus on the most important business flows. Those are typically going to represent about 80% of your business. They can include customizations or developments as needed, but really we're only focusing on those must-haves and those essential requirements to operate your business, right? So sometimes this MVP may contain, many workflows that may affect several applications. That's why we want to make sure this foundation is set. So as we move forward, we're again iterating on top of this process. After that, we have our 20%, right? So this is going to include any additional phases. Let's say any maybe custom developments you're looking at, any particular nice to haves that we talked about before. Anything that might deviate from the original goal of the project, but is something that you as the client wants to see. So really, for these additional phases, it's a good practice to have a brief kickoff meeting in case any policies have changed after the initial rollout or go live date of the MVP. Sometimes these can happen months, maybe a year into the process, depending on the scale and scope of your implementation. This might also contain a couple different workflows that impact several applications. That's why it's so vital that the original MVP be the foundation for all the work that we're building on in the future. Just want to remind you guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm definitely going to get to them in just a sec. Just want to make sure that I can address all you guys as needed and you get all your thoughts out on paper. So to kind of drive this home, right? We're on to the third stage of the project, which is support. So really, after this project stage has likely taken a few months. We've gone through multiple iterative processes. We've communicated with your single point of contact. We've better defined some of those project goals. And now we have a good idea of how long this project is going to take, where the deadlines are, what the budget is. And we know, hey, are we on budget? Are we following up as we should? Is our go live date still our go live date? So how do we do this, right? How do we communicate with you? How do we maintain that effective communication and prioritize effectively? A couple of the tools we use, and this isn't all of them, but one is our implementation organizer, right? So this is going to be your single point of truth. It's going to house all business requirements, any particular contacts, responsibilities, roles, anything that you need to see from us, just to make sure that one, we're delivering on time. And hey, we said we'd have this deliverable to you, next week, maybe June 2nd, it gets delivered June 2nd. This way, you always know what we're doing, what we're working on, and possibly how many hours we spent of your implementation. So we want to make sure this is a transparent process for the both of us as well. Also, you're going to be supplied with individualized training material based on your particular workflows, right? So whatever you work out with your implementation consultant, once you guys implement it, they can either set up a training schedule for you, for your team. We can record that. And they can also build these training materials to make sure that you guys are able to use it in the future, right? At the end of the day, it's important that our solutions and the workflows that we provide you are scalable. We're looking to grow with you, right? Also, there are a ton of free resources online that we provided, whether it comes to our documentation, our help forum, our implementation guide. And I left this for last, but my favorite, our e-learning site, odoo.com/slides. It's how I learned to use Odoo, and it's honestly the most effective resource for you if you want to take ownership of your Odoo. And you really want to get into, hey, how do I use this? How do I get the most out of Odoo as it is now? Additionally, you have a couple different avenues for support, right? So the biggest is going to be your BSA. So that is your implementation consultant. They are going to work with you on configuration, implementation, coaching. If you need any data imported, we're trying to define your workflows. That is going to be your BSA. Your account manager is someone like me, someone who you've been in consistent contact with. Any questions about billing, about your contract, about payment, any one-offs are going to go to your account manager. So they'll have your back. And then we also have 24/5 support via email and phone. We also have an emergency support line, but that's for any, generic software questions, any bugs, anything that you find, go ahead and give us feedback on. We definitely value that, and it helps us as we move forward just to make Odoo and our implementation process a better experience for you individually. So thanks for joining today. I want to open up the floor to any questions. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat, but keep throwing questions out there. I'm happy to answer them. Okay. So I'm still waiting on some questions. Okay, cool. So one of the frequently asked questions that I've run into is, before we start our implementation, do we have to clean our data? As everyone knows, right, clean data is extremely important. A clean database is a happy database, right? It's pretty time consuming. So the cleaner the data, the better the quality, and the easier it is going to be to import into Odoo's ecosystem. Another is how can we provide feedback, right? As I said, communicate with your implementation consultant just to make sure things are on the right track. You're also going to receive a monthly email to provide feedback. Also, you'll have a chance to provide feedback during your weekly meetings with the implementation consultant, and you can always reach out to them at any time. Another question I get a lot is, should we import historical data? We really recommend only importing the most critical data into Odoo, depending on the scope of your project, which can be, can vary. The amount of data that we need to import, it can really eat up valuable time and elongate your implementation. It's recommended that this is done either at project completion or when it makes the most sense to do so. Let's see. Any more questions in the chat? Okay. Okay. How much time should you dedicate to implementation? That's a big one, right? And it's hard for me to answer that, but it depends on the size and scope of your implementation. During that initial discovery phase, as we're grilling you about your workflows, your processes, any variables we might need to know, any additional context, um, the single point of contact will be learning, will be testing, validating workflows, and joining weekly meetings. It's at that point we'll be able to give you a more accurate estimate of one, how long the project is going to take, how many phases we'll have to break this into, and as you know usually say, you know, plan always works till you get punched in the mouth. Something's bound to go wrong, but if we're proactively mitigating these risks and trying to identify them early, we can hit that goal of getting your project in under budget and on time. Another question I get a lot is, should we practice in a test environment, right? We do have trials, right? So all testing and learning, it really should occur in a duplicate database. It can be pretty difficult to undo transactional data in your production environment. So I always recommend duplicating a database and going from there. Okay. Another question is, can Odoo publish to MQTT? Yes, in an SH environment, yes. Keep the questions coming, guys. Yeah, Odoo. So Odoo SH is where API connections are made. So if you have any questions on that, my email is also in the chat, so feel free to shoot me an email as well. But keep them coming. When going live, how much testing should be done? That's a good question. What I can tell you is it depends on the scope of your implementation. I would say I would consult with your implementation consultant. Um, Typically, we test in multiple staging environments, right? So I would say test as much as possible, but I would need a little bit more context to answer that. Last call for questions, guys. Go ahead and send them over. Okay, I think those are all the questions we have. We are good to go. Well, thanks for joining my webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, my information is in the chat, so feel free to shoot me an email. I promise I'm friendly. Take care. Looking forward to doing this again soon.